is going to work. So hello, my name is Clarissa. I'm the creator of She Rocks at College, where I help college women get better grades without the stress, overwhelm, and lack of social life. And if you are currently taking a summer course that is considered accelerated, meaning it's between 5 and 8 weeks, and you're struggling to keep up in your summer classes, you're struggling to keep up with the weekly exams, to keep up with the enormous amount of reading that happens in summer classes, if you are struggling with managing how to make the most out of your summer, right? You still want to be able to hang out with your friends, go to the beach, do things that help you relax. If you're struggling to kind of manage that and your summer class that meets anywhere between every single day to several hours for several hours at a time, in this video, this live stream, what I'm going to do is teach you the step-by-step plan that you need to put in place if you want to see success in the class and not have it affect your overall GPA. So the first thing that I will say is that the most important thing to remember in summer classes is that lecture really needs to be a non-negotiable. Lecture has to be the place where you're receiving and getting the most of the information that you're supposed to learn. So if you are familiar with my 3-step study protocol, which looks like this, what I'm talking about is step 1, which is exposure. During the exposure phase, what you're doing is you are learning. You're basically starting from point 0. You're learning the content that your professor says that you're supposed to know at this point, right? You're paying for these summer classes because there is some information, there is some content, there is something, some subject that you need to learn. And at the end of the week, at the end of the course, your professor is going to evaluate how much of that information you actually learned, how much of that information you understood. And the way that they do this is via exams, which is why in step 2 of my study method, it is testing to make sure, because what you want to do is you want to make sure that you actually know the information before it's too late. And too late would be when you have a quiz, when you have an exam, when you have a paper that you have to hand in, when you have a presentation that you have to do on the topic. So that's step 2. However, because of summer classes being so fast-paced, because of the fact that what they're doing is they're basically taking 16 weeks worth of content, right? Because a normal semester in the fall and the spring runs for 16 weeks, but in a summer class, they're taking 16 weeks worth of content and they are squishing it into a 5 to 8 week period, which means that you're learning the same amount of content, but it's being crammed in a shorter amount of time, which means that it's going to be really important for you to be able to pick up on the main ideas, be able to pick up on what's important and what's not important inside of lecture. And if you lack that skill, what's going to happen is that by week 2 of your class, you're going to fall extremely behind. And in a summer class where it's so fast-paced, it is so hard to catch up once you've fallen behind. So what you need to do is you need to create for yourself a pre-lecture cheat sheet. This is what I call prepping and priming as part of the She Rocks at College study method. Prep and prime is when you are reviewing your syllabus in a very particular manner. I teach my students how to dissect their syllabus, and what they're pulling out of there are predictions of what's actually going to show up on the exam, what their professors considers to be important. And in the pre-lecture cheat sheet, they're creating a list of questions or topics that are tailored to the topic your professor will be covering that day in lecture. And the whole goal of the pre-lecture cheat sheet is to prime your brain to pay attention to the things you will most likely see as questions on the exam. Once you show your brain what topics your professor is going to talk about, when you're sitting in lecture and you're listening to him or her talk about the concept, you start to pick up on, hey, that was in the syllabus. Hey, that was in the PowerPoint. And I remember, because Clarissa taught me, that whenever I see words phrased in this manner, whenever I see things show up in this manner, either on the syllabus or on the PowerPoint, it means that I'm going to get a question on it on the exam, or this might be an essay topic that I get. So your ears are going to start perking up to that information. And that's how you're going to know where to write that, what's important and what to write down in your notes. And you can start pulling these questions and doing this for yourself by looking at the objectives in your PowerPoint slides. Look at the headlines and subheadlines of your textbook if you got one assigned inside of your summer class. Look at the end of chapter summary. Look at any pre-tests or post-tests that come with the online resources of your book. Or you can even go as far as being bold and asking your professor for a sample of an exam. A lot of times they have practice exams that they will give out to students, especially if you ask for them in office hours. I experienced this with my chemistry exam. The professor made some things available, but when I was in office hours, I particularly told him in these words, I really want to make sure I do a good job in this class. I have a hard time understanding the information. It helps me when I can work through problems, and I have a lot of problems to work through. And he gave me extra practice exams, and that was really helpful because a lot of the questions that he pulled from the exam came from those extra practice exams. So it's important that you develop these relationships with your professors, and you know how to talk to them and speak to them according to their personality type, so that they are more willing to give you information on what to look for on exams, what to really pay attention to from their PowerPoint slides or their lecture content, what to really pay attention to in the textbook. And you have all of this information that you can use to your advantage when it comes down to studying. So once you have this pre-lecture cheat sheet, which is a guide for you that alerts your brain what's important to what to pay attention to, the next part is really creating a study routine that helps you to retain the information and stop data dumping. What's data dumping? Data dumping is when you cram because you need to pass an exam, but once the exam is over, you lose all that information. That works great if you're only ever going to see that content one time. But when you're in classes that build upon each other, or you're in classes that there's a final exam that is cumulative, you need to retain that information. You need to hold on to that information for the entire semester, and even further if you're in a major that builds upon the content that you previously had. So the only way to stop data dumping is by doing something that's called space retrieval and allowing time to forget to learn. So the way that you can do this, and there's something called the forget to learn theory, which holds that subconsciously when we allow for timing to forget, we aid learning by filtering out competing facts. So our brain starts to create meaningful connections and gets rid of the stuff that we don't need and will confuse us. 2, forgetting allows the next time you try to recall the information, or the next time that you review the information, deeper learning happens. Each time you try to recall a fact, talk about a topic without your notes, and you can't, when you reread the notes to try to refresh your memory, your brain builds a stronger connection. That is what neuroplasticity is all about. Everything that I teach, the whole study method, the She Rocks at College study method, is based off of neuroscience. This is how your brain was designed to learn. And when you don't create study routines, when you don't create things that leverage the way that your brain was designed to learn, you're going to work twice as hard. You're going to study for so much longer than everybody else. So it's important that you learn these topics, that you learn these concepts, and you start creating study routines. So what does spaced quiz and recall look like for a class like a summer class where you're having a test every single week? So let's pretend that Monday is the first week of lecture. You're going to learn the content in the class. You're going to follow your pre-lecture cheat sheet. You're going to answer the questions based off of the information that the professor's giving you. That's going to be your notes. On Wednesday, you're going to quiz yourself on that content using quiz and recall, which is a method or a tool that I teach students that I work with inside of study school and one-on-one. And you're also going to review Monday's lecture content. On Friday, you're going to quiz and review anything that you learned on Wednesday. And then on Sunday, you're going to quiz and review for both Monday and Wednesday content. What you're doing is that you are over time exposing yourself to the information, testing yourself to make sure that you know it. And because you're reviewing every other day, you're also moving into the relearning part of the She Rocks at College study method. Relearning is important because what it does is it fills in the knowledge gaps, right? The knowledge gaps, the things that you really don't know, that are confusing you, that you don't understand, are usually the things that cause you to get questions wrong on the exam. But if you have a study method, if you have a study routine that builds in time to relearn, to fill in those knowledge gaps, you're going to be 100% prepared for the exam. There is no way that you're not going to be prepared. The only way that you're not going to be prepared is if you don't do the work, if you don't actually do your pre-lecture cheat sheet and go to lecture, because lecture is important in these short summer classes, because that's where all the content is being taught, because professors understand that you're not going to have a lot of time to read outside of class. So these are the classes where you don't want to miss lecture. You also want to make sure that you're doing space retrieval every other day in these summer classes. And there are so many different ways that you can do quiz and recall. There are so many different methods that you can use. And I do customize study plans for students and tell them which methods would be best based off of how their professor is teaching the content, based off of how the content is laid out. And so if you want more detailed information on that, stay tuned to the end, because I am going to show you where you can get a complimentary study strategy call with me if you're interested in that. So yeah, so that's basically it. That's what you're doing. You're doing these steps over and over until you can prove to yourself that you've learned the information. The biggest thing that I can say about summer classes is this: make sure that you're attending lecture. Make sure that you're showing up prepared for lecture. That means previewing the content. That means creating those questions for your pre-lecture cheat sheet, and that you are quizzing yourself on the content at least every other day. So Tasha on YouTube is saying, oh no, the comment went away. Let me see if I can find it. My professor told us that it makes no sense for us to be absent in class since the class is so compact. Yeah, if you miss a class in your summer course, you might as well drop out. I have experienced this, right? Everything that you're going through right now, if you've experienced failure in college, I have been through it. And I have gone from failing out of a bio major, from failing out of 7 courses by the time I was a junior in college, to graduating nursing school with honors while working 2 jobs and building the company that I own now, which is called She Rocks at College. It had nothing to do with my IQ level, right? I didn't become smarter overnight. What I did was I leveraged the neuroscience, the research, the things that have been proven to work in regards to being a better student and learning how to learn. That is all I did. And I did the work, right? I did the work to stop procrastinating, meaning that I worked on any limiting beliefs that I had. I worked on the negative self-talk that I had. I did a lot of work around that area. And I also did a lot of work around my study skills. I did all the trial and error, right? It was hard at the beginning because when you're learning a new concept, it's difficult at first. And when I was first putting these things in place, my grades weren't going up, and I'm thinking, maybe it is me, maybe it is that I'm dumb. But then I realized that it was just I had to learn how to do it effectively. And so what I do for students is I cut down that learning curve so that they don't have to go through the trial and error, so that they don't have to go through the struggles and the failures and things like that I did. I mean, you can do this on your own 100%, because I did it on my own. I had mentors to work with on my mindset, but as far as the study skills go, I did it on my own. But it took me 2 years to master. So ask yourself, do you have those 2 years? Do you have money to throw down the drain? Are you willing to rack up the student debt to learn that on your own? Or does it make sense to work with someone like me who's a study strategist who has worked with, at this point, over 200 students, teaching them these skills, and my success rate is 100% with the students that actually apply what it is that I teach them. The students that show up and do the work have 100% pass rate in their classes. So if you are interested in getting a sneak peek at what it's like to work with me, I highly suggest that you book a study strategy call with me. And I'm going to, in the comments, put a link for you to do that. Just give me one moment to grab that for you. So it is bit.ly/study call. So that's bit.ly/study call. Go ahead and pick a time and a day that works for you. If a time and day doesn't work for you, you can always send me an email. The email is hello@sherocksatcollege.com, and my assistant Brittany will go ahead and set you up in my schedule. So if you have any questions, just leave them below this video on YouTube or leave it below the video in here, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have about succeeding in your summer classes. So I hope that this was helpful, and as always, thank you so much for watching. Bye.